August 10th, and we're here. Awesome, I hear the recording's in progress. So today is August 10th, and we're here to continue our ongoing conversation around the RFO and what it means for practitioners across the acquisition community. So as always, this is meant to be a practical session. So we know that everyone out there is working through real procurements and real timelines, especially as we work our way through the fourth quarter. So our goal today is to help connect policy to practice and hopefully make that journey a little bit easier. So thank you for joining us today. We know you've got other commitments, so thank you so much. So before we get started here, before I move any further, I'm interested in hearing where you're all logging in from, so please let us know in the chat. I'm here in the National Capital Region, as is my co-host. So we're still here in the dog days of summer, so hopefully you're all coming from somewhere a little bit cooler and drier. So I'm seeing some great responses there. Some places, Texas, that looks like it's maybe even a little bit worse, but Colorado, I see some nice ones there. Great. Okay, so as you're posting that, I did want to just launch a poll here real quick. So the poll's also going to ask you where you're from, ask a little bit about your background. So please fill out the poll. Also, Jimmy, if you're there in the background, if you could share that QR code just so we're able to move forward. Excellent. And can we go to the next slide, please? So before we jump in, just a couple of housekeeping items I want to take care of. As mentioned, this is a recorded session, and this will be on the RFO playlist and CSOD in the future. So if there's something you'd like to revisit later, if there's something that's discussed today, something in the chat or something we talk about, or if you know somebody who wasn't able to make it today, this recording will be available up on CSOD. So just be aware of that. For CLPs, always an important topic. There's no need to put your name or email address in the Zoom chat. We've already got a roster of everybody that's attending here today. So we will see that just through the CSOD login. However, if you are joining by phone today and you are not looking at a slide right now, please contact us at sagtesting@gsa.gov. That way we can ensure that you get credit for the CLP today. And finally, we really do want this to be interactive. Please use the chat for questions, comments, experiences, practical issues, anything that you're seeing. You're all on mute, but you are able to reach us through the chat. So please feel free to chat away and please interact with us as we're going through this. Next slide, please. So just a quick introduction. Jimmy Abiad and I will be leading the conversation today. We're both detailees from other agencies. Jimmy comes from Department of Homeland Security. I'm a military officer on detail from the Army. And we're going to help guide the discussion, keep things moving, make space for questions and conversation. And as mentioned, this is not intended to be a one-way broadcast. So Jimmy is on, Polly Hall is also on. We're going to be alternating between speaking and monitoring the chat so we can keep the dialogue open. So as you're asking questions, somebody may be in the chat giving responses, or we may be talking through the responses and things like that. So all is open here. It's really meant to be interactive and an ongoing dialogue. So welcome to everybody, and thank you again for joining us. Next slide, please. So a quick reminder on where we've been on some of the far forward office hours. Again, if you want to revisit any prior topics, these recordings are available on CSOD. Playlist is a good resource if you're onboarding somebody new or refreshing yourself on a particular topic or just trying to understand how pieces fit together. So again, great reference. You can look through some of the things that we've already talked about. So, possibly a great addition to your fourth quarter struggles here. So let's get going. Next slide. Okay, so here's what we're planning on covering this afternoon. First, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on where we are in the FAR overhaul journey. Then Jimmy's going to be discussing the core role in the messy middle and introducing our guest today, Christopher Cady from the Department of Homeland Security. And collaboration is the main theme today. So Jimmy's also going to be sharing a recent experience of interagency and industry collaboration from the recent NCMA World Congress. After that, we're going to open it up for a discussion. As we talk through different things, feel free to bring things up, and then we'll just open it up for general topics after that. Next slide. Okay, so now we got the intro stuff taken care of. So let's spend a little bit of time here because this is where we capture a little bit where we are in the overall journey. So where we are today, August 10th, is most agencies are deviated and working through the practical application of the RFO deviation as we're continuing to work through rulemaking simultaneously. So several FAR cases have already moved through the rulemaking process or continue to move through the rulemaking process. And the public comment period for 4 cases covering 18 FAR parts closed on the 23rd of July, and we received hundreds of comments. Those comments are being reviewed, and the community should stay tuned for a next step on what happened during those comment sessions. So we're also going to see FAR cases for the remaining sections of the FAR. Those are coming up later in the year. So this is a phased effort. We're going to continue to see more activity as additional parts move through the rulemaking process. But the important thing to remember for practitioners, and this is the most important takeaway, proposed rules do not impact our work. We are still working by deviation until final rules are published and implemented. So as of today, keep following your agency's issued deviation and implementation guidance, which means that until final rules are published and implemented, that deviation is what governs within your agency, assuming your agency has adopted the RFO deviation. So a lot of stuff happening. It's great to pay attention to it. Not everybody's got time to pay attention to it, but just be aware that you should be following the deviation language. All the stuff that's in the proposed rules is just things that are going through the process right now. So that's the most important takeaway. So where that leaves us is where we're all living right now, the space between the old framework and the fully codified future state. So between the blue and the orange here, and this is the space that we're calling the messy middle. So if you've been with us before, I'm sure you've heard this term before, messy middle. We're in a transition phase. Things get complicated. The rules are changing. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. So it's messy. But a lot of good progress happens in this space. And that's why it's really important that we're having these sessions and we're engaging in this dialogue. Next slide, please. So messy middle, a little bit more about this. So good news is no one's expected to figure it out alone. Practitioner work stream at GSA, that's our team, obviously pulling from detailees from all other agencies to hear different experiences. But we were stood up to help work through implementation challenges as they come up. And this is also where communication and collaboration become essential too. We want to stress that implementation is not just something the contracting office does. We're aware of that. We hear from a lot of contracting officers. We hear from a lot of policy folks. But implementation also touches requirements owners. It touches end users, people that use the products. It touches attorneys, touches your budgeting and finance people. It touches oversight and industry also. So today specifically, we're kind of opening up the aperture a little bit. We're not just talking about just contracting officer roles or just policy roles. Today we're going to be discussing contracting officer representatives, and because cores are often the people that are closest to the requirement and the performance of the actual contracts. So they're not contracting officers, but they understand the mission, they understand operational constraints, and they understand what successful performance actually looks like. So they have a unique perspective to bring to us for what's happening during the RFO process and as we engage with this messy middle. So really excited that we're going to be able to engage in that today. Next slide. So that brings us directly to the next part of today's conversation, core role in the messy middle. And with that, I will pass it over to Jimmy Abia to continue the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And before we jump into this conversation and before I introduce Chris, I see some of you are still filling out the poll, but I can still see some of the responses. So I just want to give you an idea of who's in the room. I was kind of excited to see that we have almost 40% of you are cores today. So that'll be good for today's discussion. And the other half are a mix of COs and contract specialists, procurement policy, and then a few others. We have some executives here, attorneys, program directors. Thank you all for joining today. It's a diverse group that supports the acquisition workforce. We welcome your feedback, questions, keep putting them in the chat. And I know we went through some of the policy things. We often talk about this stuff all the time. So if this is new to you, which it sounds like 25% of you at least said that your first time here. So some of this stuff might be new to you. We welcome your questions. Keep dropping them in the chat as we move on. And a reminder that this will all be recorded and uploaded to CSAUD. So if you need to come back to that. And one of our team has been really helpful to drop the slides in the chat. Also, they are added to the resources tab here. We also have an email, sagtesting@gsa.gov, and we'll keep saying that as we move forward. So, all right. I'm going to introduce Chris Cady today. He's a contracting officer representative from ICE at DHS. We're going to do a little back and forth on how he's feeling today and about the core and the RFO. and that role, how the role has been impacted. As Brian mentioned, I'm on detail from ICE. I'm a on trainings and different projects there. I can attest to enjoying working with him and him being passionate about this topic. So we invited him to speak today and share. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, I'll let Chris introduce himself. Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jimmy, and really glad to be here. Yeah, so I'm a core and a program manager at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I've been a core for over 10 years. I'm a level 3 core. I oversee our ICE Wide Language Services contract. I also developed an ICE Core Academy Insight page, which is a centralized repository for core training resources, best practices, and standards. I realized that there were so many different resources that were available to me, but they were just dispersed throughout the DHS and ICE web pages. And one of the things I do right now is I provide training to cores on a multitude of different things. We just got done providing training on the technical evaluation team and how to write effective technical evaluations. We did one on cost implementation and surveillance. We did one on contract discrepancy reports. And then we did an overview of kind of financial management responsibilities that cores have. So we tried to go over kind of the life cycle of being a core. So that's what we do. That's what we're trying to do. And yeah, thank you so much, Jimmy.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And what I would ask right off the bat is I know a lot of our focus on, especially on our team, has been from the contracting specialist, contracting officer role. And we often feel like the cores or program managers have been a step outside the communication. Do you want to start by maybe touching on that topic or how that's been for you?
Yeah, so I mean, so Jimmy left us, and I think at the end of 2025, and I was going through my inbox, and I just realized that I've only had 3 it's going to impact our work a lot. It just speaks to just the limited information that we're brought in, and sometimes it's one of those blast emails where everyone pays a little attention to it, but not enough. And so to have something that's going to have such a big impact on us, it's something that I definitely want to start being more engaged on, and then also working with our Office of Acquisition Management to ensure that more cores are aware of what is going on, the impacts that it's going to have on us, how it might make our jobs easier. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be part of this because this is just increasing my exposure to it as well.
Yeah, good. And I know we were working on this before even a lot of the release of the RFO and all those policy changes. And even then, would you say how did you feel like the communication was and kind of being informed about your role as a core?
With this RFO or as a core?
Even before the RFO as a core.
Well, communication can sometimes be limited. I think the biggest thing is it's a two-way street. Yeah, we're constantly trying to work with our COs and CSs to ensure that we're all on the same page. So, depending on the requirement and depending on that communication and that relationship to it, it's has big impacts. I'll say that.
Yeah. And I guess I say that too, because one of the most impactful things you did, which we can go to the next slide, you mentioned the internal site you made for cores. Do you want to talk more about like how that came about and what it looked like?
Yeah, so one of the things that I realized is, that we as cores, we get some initial training, some onboarding if we're lucky. But I realized that there were so many different resources and trainings that were available to cores, either DHS, FAA, wherever it be, but there was no centralized area to get access to this. I also realized that there was a lot of key core functions there was no training for. They give us an FFMS book, at least in DHS, that tells us all the different types of financial duties that we'll have to do, paying invoices, running financial reports, but they give us a 1,000-page book and they expect us to have any interest in reading that. And so my thing was, I'm going to create PowerPoints that do step-by-step step-by-step of each of these key functions that we do as cores. And then also one of the things I also developed was we had McKinsey and Company come in and do an audit of kind of our training and how we equipped cores. And one of the big findings was the fact that we don't provide enough training. We don't give them the resources to do their jobs. And so one of the things I did is work on these kind of refresher trainings. So it reiterated what are the core roles and responsibilities, because I always feel like there's a disconnect between what we're responsible for and what COs or CSs are. Another one was, QoS. It's so important to write a good one because at the end of the day, we are the ones accountable for ensuring that the performance meets the expectations. So we can always complain about the contractor's performance, but if we are not part of that as well, and if we're not writing good ones, then we're at the end of the day culpable just as they are. So yeah, I was just trying to provide these key trainings on things that impact cores on the day-to-day. So yeah, this site really just tried to consolidate all the information that was available and then trying to take into account some of the trainings that were provided and making it a little easier, because at the end of the day, I don't want to go through a 1,000-page document, and I don't think most people do.
Yeah, I am on the same page. That's why we get along. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat. So confirming that this is something that was created for ICE. It was just a story I wanted to share of something Chris did out of his own initiative. I think what we realized too, even me as a contracting officer, when I worked with my cores, I would often do what for me was the most basic of resources, and they would be so appreciative of it. And I just realized how impactful it was to spend let's spend an hour with just the cores and provide resources or a site, and that has been really impactful. And they seem to really appreciate it, just gathering those resources into one spot. And it seems like the cores are responding well to you sharing these things.
Yeah, and for the ICE cores, they should have access to it. I'm not sure if DHS cores have access to it, but it is something that can be replicated across government. I just realized that at the end of the day, this is going to save me time. So if it saves me time, why don't I just start building something out that's going to help other cores out? So,
Yeah.
I want to make things easier on me and everybody else, and I want everyone to be, equipped with the same resources and information that I have been able to gather over the amount of, the 10 years that I've been doing this. So,
Yeah. I would also I'll take this opportunity to make a plug for our Far Forward Alliance forum. If you all don't have access, someone on our team can drop the link in the chat. That's available to cores. So if you all are looking for a sample and you want to see how someone across government is doing it, that's at least one option for you on a way you can access a sample or share resources with each other. We'd love more core participation in there. It's definitely for you as well as contract specialists. I saw someone ask about the level of effort in maintaining this site and keeping current timely information. You look like you already have thoughts about that.
So a lot of it is dependent. So I work with Winifred Williams, who is works with our quality assurance division to ensure that all the different templates and requirements documents are up to date. So it's really dependent on what kind of the new updates that are being made. Sometimes it's a lot, and then sometimes it's quarterly. So it's kind of just dependent on when there are new requirements documents being pushed out, and then I will essentially Winifred will loop me in, and then I update the site.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. So that's and if you Winifred Williams at ICE is the acquisition career manager. There might be another term for that at other agencies, but the ACM. And she works within the procurement shop at ICE. And so that there is some of that bridge with the acquisition career and certification folks that might be a great resource for you at your agency as well, to all you folks out there. And I saw someone ask a good question, and we can keep asking these questions as we move because we're going to hit some of these topics. But Devin asked, what do cores need to know that contract specialists and officers don't know, and maybe vice versa?
Sorry, say that question again. I just want to make sure I captured that.
What cores need to know that COs or CSs might not, or what should cores know that a CO can provide?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, like knowing all the different documents that are required as part of the requirements package, I think sometimes we'll get the Appendix G that generally will list out all the different requirements documents. But I think it's all, and we've talked about this, Jimmy, before we had this session, but it's really important for the CO, CS, and core to be playing from the same sheet of music. And so that's why it's really important prior to, kicking off the solicitation process, that we have all the different documents laid out, what the time frames as well. This generally takes a year to get something on the street. So, there's now more pressure to get things to go a little quicker, but just making sure that we all are giving each other enough time as well, because I think that's the thing that we all kind of forget, is we have so many other jobs outside of our core job generally. So yeah, it's just making sure you're all kind of working together, having these touch points. I think that's one of the things that I think is really important, is having that touch point, saying like, okay, this is what we need to start working at the next day. This is what we need to have done by this day, and just kind of mapping it out.
Yeah. I kept that quote playing from the same sheet of music, just because I also like music and play it, but also it leads us nicely into our next topic. If we go to the next slide, on collaboration. And I know when we met, there's a few big points I felt like that you hit that would have been really helpful, or will be helpful, I assume, for most of the workforce and for cores and COs. But specifically, do you want to start maybe talking about acquisition planning and market research and way collaboration stories, like good things, bad things?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes there's, I don't want to say forgetfulness, but at the end of the day, like cores and program offices are the ones that understand the requirement the most. And and I sometimes feel like the core will get brought into the process not as early as maybe they should be. But my thing is, um, yeah, like as a core in the program office, we should be defining the requirement, and then informing the CO and CS what that requirement is, and understanding, helping them understand also the marketplace, because at the end of the day, like the core and the program office understand the marketplace a lot more, in my opinion, than the COs, because the COs and CSs have a lot of other different types of requirements that they're asked to do. So the expertise generally is with the program office. So I think it kind of it is driven. I mean, market research is the owner, is the responsibility of the core. But at the end of the day, like there has to be a two-way street too, where you're helping the CO CS understand that marketplace, and where maybe small business doesn't work for this requirement. Maybe we do go large. So yeah, I think it's just that two-way street of communication is really important, because sometimes we'll get things pushed on us. Leadership will tell us we need more small business awards. And it's like, well, for this type of requirement, it's going to be really hard to fulfill and get a good, a good deliverable. Sorry. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there ever a too early, or how soon would you love to like first meet with a CEO or the acquisition team?
I mean, I always say at least a year in advance. But for me, like I'm tracking data from the beginning of the peer performance till the end. So, I am 3 years out already, like gathering kind of market research and information that I can relay to the marketplace, because at the end of the day, like I want them to understand our requirement just as much as we understand it too. So I'm, I'll speak for the ICE-wide language services contract. I'm looking at our expenditures, how much we're utilizing contract, the types of languages we're using, all the stuff that helps us kind of, and also helps the CO and CS understand that, we need a vendor that can fulfill all these different requirements in 24/7, 365. So
Yeah. And I know if I was talking to a contracting officer, some of them might say that they don't hear from their cores, or it's hard to get a hold of their cores. Is there like a method that has worked for you for like successful communication and collaboration with those folks?
I mean, I think it's persistence is key. I mean, I mean, sadly, that people that they have a lot of things going on their plate, um, and I mean, at the end of the day, like persistence is key. I don't know if there's a tried and true method, because if you know of one, I would love to know it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I work with cores, and I also 70% of them respond back to me in a decent time frame, but then others I just don't get a response from, and I go, all right, well, your inputs, if you don't want to
Yeah.
have input, that's your prerogative.
Yeah, honestly, it's the same pretty much of most workforce. You find the people you can collaborate with the best.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
And if you can tell yourself that I've reached out to the core and they haven't responded, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things I wrote down that you said initially was that we would love to have more touch points. I wanted to maybe emphasize that because I feel like some CEOs might also think they don't want to like bother their core, or they don't think the core might want to be in the loop as much as they do. But you saying you do actually want you, I mean, affirming what you've already said, I just kind of wanted to emphasize that.
No, I mean, if the core doesn't want to be part of the loop, that's a huge issue because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be accountable for measuring performance. They're going to be the one that has to do the CPARs. They're the ones that are going to have to do the CDR if that ends up being the case. Like if they're not part of the solution or part of the equation, then that's a big deficiency, and that's where I don't want to say you should get their management involved, but if they're not being part of this that then that's a big issue.
Yeah. I did see Crystal mention candy, coffee, and lunch to get the CEO attention, contract officer attention. So I'd like to also affirm that. I know, so we're talking about collaboration with the acquisition workforce, and you mentioned knowing the market. So a big theme, which we might hit on later, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, is on collaborating with industry. How's your experience been like that? I know a lot of folks are afraid to reach out to industry or don't know what the rules are for them reaching out to industry. Have you done that with your acquisition teams? You do that on your own? What does that look like?
No, yeah, I mean, I think there's always like a fear to do an RFI, which is I think there's just always a fear of like going out of bounds of what you're able to do. I mean, I think the biggest thing is always making sure that you're looping in the CO or CS about what your intentions are. I think you can always there's the GSA library, e-library that I think is always a great resource. But I mean, I wish we had more industry days at ICE. That is one thing that we I think used to do a little better. But we haven't because of all the different things that are going on that just hasn't been a point of emphasis. So
Yeah.
if there can be more industry days, I think that's always a great thing to do, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes there's a new solution out there that even the program office is not aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always new things happening, especially in certain fields.
Yeah, and that's why I think the RFI is so great. Is like you list out your requirements, what and then just get a better understanding of the marketplace. Um, yeah.
So I know in the RFO, they're on like under Parts 8, the Federal Supply Schedule, and existing contracts, they introduce a lot of flexibilities and some streamlined things about how you can evaluate and engage with industry and how you can set up your evaluation criteria. Have you, I mean, it's okay to say no. Is this stuff you're already aware of or is there stuff you still want to learn more kind of thing?
Definitely still want to learn more for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you did mention, said it's in part of those touch points about talking through requirements development and eval criteria, which I think is huge for any acquisition team, and it's definitely an emphasis in the RFO. Do you want to talk about maybe some helpful ways or helpful things that contracting officer has done to help develop requirements with you or an evaluation strategy?
Well, yeah, I think COs or CSs always are great about figuring out ways to put in accountability without going too far. I think there's a good sometimes the program office wants to rake people over the coals. And I think there's like a good balance between working with the CO to define also what is a good requirement too, like putting numbers to things. I think that's the that smart acronym, like just to be able to define instead of having vague requirements, being able to really like touch into where we can utilize these requirements for the cost. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think COs and CSs are really helpful in making further defining the requirements that are made.
And how comfortable are you with things like oral presentations or on the spot consensus? Anything, I assume you're for less paperwork.
So I like oral presentations, but sometimes I think, and I can only speak to what I've seen. Sometimes we just get the salesman with the oral presentations, and you don't really get a good understanding of a vendor's capabilities.
Yeah.
So I think oral presentations are great. There is still like the core, or whoever's doing the technical evaluation still has to put all that on paper. So oral presentations are great. I mean, it ends up being the preference of the program office what they think is the best. But I always feel like oral presentations, we just get the person trying to sell us and maybe don't know the requirement as much.
Yeah. Have you had options for any oral presentations that allow for dialogue?
Yeah, so actually one of the ones that we just did, we just awarded a year and a half ago, a program and analytic contract, and there was a lot, they provided us the PDF, their PowerPoint, which was really helpful. But in my opinion, I got a lot more going through their prior experience and just seeing whether they would be able to handle the scope of our contract. And their orals were able to kind of speak a little bit to their technical capabilities, but it was, yeah, I felt like I was more schmooze than informed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess one there, a plug for prior experience, but two, I guess a plug for having that conversation again with your contracting officer. Like, what would be more effective for us to not just do a presentation because somebody said to do it, but maybe how do we make this useful for us? Like,
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, like that has to be a consensus between the group, with the CO and CS. Like they might have their own opinions on how we evaluate, but the program office should also be able to bring their input as well, and how they will be able to effectively evaluate a vendor. Because and this is what I said in the training that I provided on Friday was, the technical evaluation team process is so important, because at the end of the day, like, you have to understand the marketplace, you have to understand the capabilities of these vendors,
yeah,
and if by doing an effective job at that, you will eliminate or mitigate a lot of the headaches that go in after the fact once you've awarded.
yeah, no, good points. But again, all things you want to talk about, I assume, with your team.
Yes,
Um,
100%.
One hot topic I feel like that comes up for us is how to engage and work well with your legal team. Have you seen that work well, or how has that been? How's that experience been for you?
Yeah, so the training that we provided on the technical evaluation teams and how to write effective technical evaluations, we included our OPLA, commercial and acquisition law division, because at the end of the day, they are reducing our litigation risk and the risk of protest, I should say. So I think it's really important that you bring in legal to ensure that we are writing not only good technical evaluations that will pass muster, but that we are not putting ourselves in a sticky predicament by awarding something where we're not providing the necessary justification to do so.
Yeah, no, I think that they usually are. Again, appreciate the touch points. Yeah, I did see one question about not allowing the vendor to write the requirement, but using vendor given information to assist with clarifying the requirements. So draft, like, how do you develop the requirements well with the vendor, and not just taking their dictates, but how's that collaboration work effectively?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're the owners of the requirement. So yeah, like we can, by understanding the marketplace and what their capabilities are, I think, through the R5 process, you can get a general sense of what vendors are able to do. And then that helps inform like what is actually feasible, because sometimes the program officer will be asking for things that just are not attainable, or, whatever it be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess again, the importance of having that communication.
Yeah, exactly.
So to step back with I guess the structure with cores, I think I think we're familiar with how they are at ICE. I know some agencies have different models for how they centralize cores or plug them into programs. Do you have any thoughts on what makes that effective or not, or how to collaborate with your cores and local agency structures?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question here. But yeah, I mean, the core is supposed to be the team. They're supposed to, in my opinion, with the cores that we have here, they're always in our programmatic meetings so that they understand what is going on with the program, with the contract on the programmatic side. What are the deliverables they're hitting? What work is coming down the pipeline. So I think it's really crucial that the core is integrated in everything that contract is, is doing, because again, you have to be able to measure performance, but if you don't know what's going on, it's hard to measure performance.
Yes. Yeah. No, often I think, especially from a contracting officer, at least most of my experience, you award a contract and you just, hope for the best.
Yeah.
Send it, because you have 80 other things to get solicited and awarded. So you're really putting a lot of trust in the cores. But finding a way to effectively measure performance so you actually get what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah, completely.
And so the resources part, we kind of wanted to talk, and Brian helped us with that helpful cartoon on the bottom to illustrate. I think what we feel like the RFO has been for a lot of folks is like, look, we have a day-to-day job, having to intake all of this policy and all of this change has been really overwhelming. Like, how do I do my day-to-day while learning all this new stuff? Can you speak for how that's been? Have you found anything? I know you mentioned like just minimal communication, but what resources have been helpful for you, and what would be helpful for a CO to know?
With regards to RFO or just in general?
I guess in general, I feel like everything will somehow tie back to the RFO somehow. But yeah, just resources in general for you. What would you ask for from a CO or in general from leadership?
Well, again, it's just for me, it's always just making sure that I'm following the same sheet of music as the CO and CS, like making sure that I've got the latest requirements language, like whatever, if there's templates that they want me to use, that I am utilizing those templates. If there are resources that are available to me that helps me do my market research, that's really helpful. I just feel like with the resources and training, I always feel like sometimes we check the box and we provided training, but we don't think of the audience and how different audiences receive the training.
Yeah.
I think this is great that, we're doing this virtual. But yeah, everyone learns differently. So I think like providing training in different manners is always like really helpful. Videos, I think really helpful, especially if they're concise. And then, if we're doing trainings as well, make them concise too. Nobody wants to go through a training. I sometimes feel like we throw a book at people instead of helping them actually learn.
Yeah, no, that's good. So if you were to learn or want to learn about the RFO, how much time would you want to give in a day to get a RFO overall training or even partial training?
I always say like 30 minutes is an ideal amount of time. And I always feel like just be concise in what, right now we're going through an overhaul of our financial system and pushing it out. And we're doing these 3-hour trainings. And I'm like, nobody, hopefully I'm not going to get too much flack for this, but nobody wants to go through a 2-hour or 3-hour training.
Yeah.
Get it concise and make it easy to understand. If there's, I think simple pictures even help, captivate some interest in it. So I just think making it as easy as possible to follow and be interested in. Most of us don't have any interest in going back to school. So, um, you know, let's make it easier on us as possible. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and please, I'm trying to see if there are questions. We're gonna keep Chris around for a little bit. There is one more question before I kind of share what we talked about at NCMA. But I think in our planning discussion, we talked a little bit about how can a CEO kind of walk learning about it still. Like, I think we're all learning together at the same time. What are your thoughts on trying to learn that together, or that I'm assuming that's a preference you still would like to meet, even if someone is not technically proficient on everything, because that's rarely the case, right?
no, completely. If we could learn together, that's totally fine. I just want to be part of the conversation or
Yeah.
be looped in. I think that's one of the issues that we always run into is, things are forced on us and we were never part of the discussion. So, yeah, I think just being part of it is at the end of the day all we can ask for.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I caught Amy's question because sorry, some of these I'm able to catch while talking and some not, but I do think Amy had a good question about how do you as a core schedule adequate time to do core work, considering a lot of cores have other primary duties. And I know from my experience too, a lot of cores are just somehow voluntold to just, become a core, do your job, and then they think they can forget about it. How does that work for you? Or what is that balance like for your workload?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the cores will all kind of get this. Is it all depends on the contract that you're overseeing. Some contracts require a lot of work, and then hopefully you don't have too many of those. We have two cores that I'm aware of in ICE that have 25 different detention contracts under their belt. And that's just not, I don't know how they do that. So I think you just have to understand the contracts that you manage. For me, like my contract, I probably put in like 5 hours a week on it because I'm doing a lot of work on the front end to make sure that we pick the right vendor, and then it's just that communication with the CRCS and with the vendor at times, and then our my weekly or bi-weekly meetings that I have with the programmatic team just to make sure that I'm catching everything that's going on with that contract. So, but it's all dependent. I mean, yeah, like we have ICE cores that this is their 100% their focus. I mean, for me, this is about 25%. But I just try to make sure that I'm following and tracking when I'm needed to be more involved. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think sometimes some weeks it'll be 25 hours, but sometimes it'll be 4 to 5. You just have to measure, like, kind of assess what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's probably also important to communicate with your contracting officer is how much of this is my wheelhouse and how much was assigned to me. And I think I spent a lot of my time, even when we met with leadership, they often weren't aware of the role of a core, which I was always nervous about because contract success always depended on like if you had good core is everything. Like
Yeah.
like if you can just have someone stay on top of that stuff for you, especially as a contracting officer, so just the importance of, and that we do have those nomination and appointment letters that we use, but often they're like forgotten about, or maybe they get in the file. But just to bring awareness to like, yeah, definitely how much that takes up of your job and who knows about it.
Yeah. No, and I think that like we all need to realize that our one requirement is not that person's only job. The CO and CS will be doing a multitude of different things. They've got so many different other requirements. So I think it's just that balancing act of, and that's why timing is so important. We've got to give ourselves, in my opinion, at least a year if you're putting something out on the street to be able to have those conversations, those touch points.
Yeah.
Because yeah, everyone's handling a lot right now.
Yep. All right. Well, we're coming around, and I'm gonna take this point to hit on some collaboration. And if you'll, of course, stay with us, I hope, and we can continue to ask questions. But if we go to the next slide, we want to talk about a collaboration story on a lot of the stuff we just talked about, but also just share this story from NCMA. Our practitioner team, me and I think you all, maybe I'm talking like everyone knows these people at this point because Monica and Trevor and Audrey find their ways everywhere. But between GSA, NASA, and Trevor's at Commerce, we were able to host this workshop where we hosted two teams, one from NASA and one from Health and Human Services, with live requirements to actually put the RFO practice of increased collaboration and requirements development. What we did was a sort of live request for information. And it was 2 sessions split into just 2 hours total. So 1 hour one day, about an hour to 90 minutes the next day of like a lecture and lab where we explained what we were doing, what it looked like, introduced the requirements. And the next day we had, and the first day we had a few hundred people, and it was a mix of industry and procurement folks. But it was really cool to see this in action because we literally used, I was introduced to Mentimeter by my teammate, but the audience was able to scan a QR code and respond live. And we even realized if you have access to something like that, you could do that over a call, over virtually or in person. But we took the opportunity of having everybody in the room to address, is our requirement commercial? Can we use streamlined commercial procedures? What kind of evaluation criteria can we use? What contract type should this be? Should we split up this requirement? Are there small businesses that can do it? All things cores are wondering, and we were able to get feedback on those questions in minutes. So we did think it was really cool at the end of the day that what in some realities could have taken 5 RFIs over the course of several months, we finished in a few conversations in a couple hours. And I still remember one of the contracting officers, her feedback afterward was just that she was relieved. I'm like, okay, well, if we can do that for someone, that's a big deal. So we just wanted to share that story and really encourage, because even though this is a very messy middle, we have these conversations regularly too with different folks from different agencies in the acquisition workforce that, yes, there are some things that might be confusing right now, and some policies, since they're being introduced in succession, that are a little confusing of how they apply or what's changing, what's new. But overall, this push is for you to be empowered to do your job better and to really increase collaboration from the beginning all the way through contract performance in support of your mission, which, if you want to revisit part 1 in your RFO framework, if you all have been on the RFO HIT Foundations, we spent a little time talking about the guiding principles under part 1 and how we're really just trying to meet mission effectively, efficiently first, and then continue on through those priorities of a procurement role. So that's some story. If you want to learn more about that, please email us at sagtesting@gsa.gov. And from here, we want to move to the next slide. We can just have an open mic and bring some questions if there's anything left. And as we answer questions, feel free, you can browse through the remaining slides. There's some hyperlinks with a lot of resources, which we can hit on before we end today if you have questions on. But anybody have any questions for Chris or us? You can put it in the chat. If we missed something and didn't get to it earlier, yeah, sorry if I know some people are putting hands up, but there is a mute up, some audience wide. So please drop a question in the chat or email us as well. So Sardar said we have communication whenever as a core I have a question. The CO is always available in response. Great job for Sardar's contracting officer. All right, well, if you're thinking about questions, we can walk through these resources for you. So if we go one slide, you can see that you can register for upcoming office hours through September, October, November, December. You can click that link to register. And then that community, the Far Forward office hours, if you want to join. Again, if you want to share resources as a core, please feel free. That's within the government. It's not public. It's a little place for learning, for practicing. Mandy, Lee, and Jessica from USDA just shared their NCMA story with actual samples. People are always looking for samples on using the highest technically rated. You can go on the form and review that and engage on that way too. So that's available. Please, you have to log into CSOD, but please feel free to participate. David, I see a question that said, couldn't there be a contract review group before the CO is involved to pre-filter the contract so that we don't burden the COs with our new core questions, and we have to help the quality of our contracts going into acquisitions before it gets to acquisition? So or Dave is asking about, it seems like, Chris, do you want to speak to that? Because it seems like it would be good to bring your questions to the CO, right? New questions?
Yeah, I think so, at least. But that's my opinion.
How do you feel about contracting officers asking you technical questions?
I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we all have to understand the requirement. So I think it has to be a two-way street.
Yeah. Just basic, yeah. So the increasing communication, bring your questions. The worst they can do is hopefully find someone else that can answer it if they don't have an answer.
And if the CO or CS has that question, I'm sure somebody else does. So, better to address it then.
Gina asked if there's a list of acronyms to spell out for cores. I don't think there's one universal one, but I did know that DHS and ICE had varieties of that within the agency.
Yeah, at least my division has created one. But I mean, the funny thing is we have sometimes acronyms that say 3 or 4 different things, so it's like becomes almost pointless.
Yeah. We're trying our best to put together an acronym list. And Shannon asked if there's a national Teams chat for cores. Not one that I know of, but I'll unless you know of one, Chris.
No, I mean that is one thing that we've actually done internally is for our cores that are over detention contracts, they have a entire Teams channel that's dedicated to them. And so, I mean, the cool thing is there's about 40 of them. So if there's a question, either one of us will chime in, or there's also leadership that's in that chat. But generally, the cores will be the ones helping the cores out because they've run into that issue. So I think I highly recommend doing that or something similar at every agency because you've got people that have been doing this for 30 years, and I'm sure they've seen some stuff. So
yeah. Which I mean, we hit on when we had the office hours, I believe last month. Feels like a while, but we did on study sessions, and we did talk about the importance of just developing some sort of community to have that as a resource. Because really, it's like the person next to you that can provide some resources that you might not be able to get anywhere else.
Yeah.
It seems like folks are agreeing with putting the core and the CO on engagement and making sure they're on the same page. We're interested from hearing people about what resources will be helpful to you as a core, especially in regard to the RFO. Please note that even if there isn't a universal Teams chat, there is again the community. We also have our RFO HIT Foundations course that you can find a link to on the slide if you want to join any of the last ones during this fiscal year. I saw Donna's asking on using my crystal ball, when do you think the RFO will be 100% codified? Let me turn the camera off real quick and I'll consult the ball and get right back to you. Sometime, I want to say in the summer. Does that sounds fair? No, they are aiming probably for next year as we go through the rulemaking. But if you go to acquisition.gov/FAR overhaul, so if we go one more slide, actually, you can see a screenshot. There is on the bottom right, not right below where the arrow is pointing, you can see that you said we did. They put up this campaign to help you keep track of the FAR cases and FAR parts that are being released for public comment. If you don't know about that yet, you can access that there. The searchable PDF RFO we are highlighting because we know it's a little bit of a pain to go through each part deviation to find what you need. You can now pull the PDF and Control F to find anything you need throughout the RFO through all parts. You can see our non-regulatory buying guides on this site. If you all haven't looked through the FAR Companion or Category Management Guide, those are on there. Practitioner albums are available for training. And then, of course, under each part deviation, you can see if your agency has deviated. So part of what's making this middle messy is that some agencies have deviated and some haven't, but you can confirm for you what is applicable for you. Is there any other questions I'm missing as I'm looking through here? I like that Steven said he bombards his cores with questions. It's important.
Jimmy, just a general ask for the group, any future potential topics that or tools that we could cover in the future that people would think would be helpful?
I saw Amy's kind of mentioning for a government-wide sort of thing that Chris has at ICE, like the Core Academy, which I imagine will be challenging, but right now we can use the forum. I know because a lot of agencies will do things differently, and so sometimes it's easier to have that local policy. But that forum, I'll keep referencing it, is a good resource, and we try to bring those folks together. Anything else? It looks like everyone's checking in. Reminder CLPs are automatically uploaded to your account on CSOD if you use the link that was provided via Zoom. If you use the phone number, or if you're calling in, you'll just have to email us and confirm what phone number you're calling from in the email sagtesting@gsa.gov. Oh, come on, thanks for sharing that link. Oh, Miyoshi asked about she said what would be helpful is to shadow a seasoned core. Have you done any shadowing, Chris?
So I got to shadow somebody for about a week. I highly recommend doing it for a lot longer than that. But no, I think that's something that all agencies should do. There needs to be more kind of mentorship and transference of knowledge. I feel like sometimes we just hire folks and then don't do any onboarding or training. So
Yeah.
I highly recommend and wish that was more the case.
I think, again, similar to those study sessions we talked about, that was all started by Acquisition Career, the intern program. And so even at people in early stage of their career, the importance of setting up the community to share some resources.
Yeah.
I got a question on implementing the RFO within the legislative and judicial branch. Well, if your agency follows the RFO, that might be outside. You're stretching my mind there a little bit. But if your agency is deviating from the RFO, you can identify that under FAR overhaul. But you might have to email us at sagtesting.gsa.gov to give you some specific guidance there. Devin asks, can we have a side-by-side meaning what the FAR said before and a cross-out line through it and what replaced it? There are aspects of this on the practitioner album. Each practitioner album, there's one for each part of the FAR on the acquisition.gov. You can see a line out. So it's not completely line in, line out, but you can see what was removed and you can see a narrative summary that is a little bit summarized to see what was changed. And they are updating those as the FAR rules go through. So, and if you have questions about that, again, you can reach out to us. And just have a couple more minutes. And Brian, if I'm missing anything, let me know. I'm looking through.
We got the all important one. Will we get our CLPs question?
Oh, well, I didn't say within 10 business days. I feel like I should put that on my forehead. I have enough space. Within 10 business days, it needs to be processed. You should see it with your account. It's usually sooner. They're really quick. It's just to be safe. It's within 10 business days. Someone recommending having an RFO session specific to architect, engineer services, and construction. You are being prophetic because that is actually forthcoming. And if you want to talk to me about construction, commercial construction, you can email me at sagtesting@gsa.gov. I'm interested in getting workforce stories and experiences with that. Someone asked if the searchable RFO is only for DoD and not DOS. It's for everybody. So action.gov is available to the public and to all agencies. And if you go to the FAR overhaul link and find that searchable RFO, it's a PDF. It should work for everybody. Reading these. Just got 2 more minutes. Oh, Polly answered the CLP question too. Thank you. I saw an ask about what happened to 2 and 2-4. I think you're referring to -5 because that is another hot topic question about the clause that included executive orders. The commercial clauses, as an easy or simple summary, anything that was removed was either considered redundant or addressed elsewhere in the FAR. That's the easy answer. If you're looking for something specific, we can help research that for you. Clauses are never fun to address live, but we can help you find whatever you need to find. Yes, and Tina, I saw the ask about GWAC specific training. There's a lot of available trainings from specific, like if you go to Oasis or Soup, they have their own trainings that are actually really helpful and points of contact that I can shout out. Oasis has always been really helpful to me in my contracting career. Okay, well, we are at 2 o'clock. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, team. If you all want to review the recording, again, it'll be on the RFO playlist. Email sagtesting@gsa.gov. If you want to follow up with any questions. And otherwise, everyone have a great week. Happy August, happy 4th quarter. I almost forgot to address that. But thank you all. Thanks for coming. Yeah.